Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the forum this evening. My name is Lindio Mazibugo. I'm one of the 4 fellows at the IOP this semester, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce somebody whom I consider, hopefully after this week, a friend, but also an admired politician from my continent of Africa, President Joyce Banda. President Banda is the former president of the Republic of Malawi. She was Africa's 2nd female president from 2012 to 2014. She served as a member of parliament, as Minister of Women and Children, and as foreign minister and vice president prior to her accession to the presidency in 2012. Dr. Banda is a politician, an entrepreneur, and a philanthropist who was voted by Forbes as Africa's most powerful women 2 years running. Time also nominated her, or voted her, one of the most powerful women in the world, alongside CNN, which voted her as one of 24's most inspirational women in politics around the world. She's a champion for the rights of women, children, the disabled, and other marginalized groups, and she is the founder of 4 organizations in Malawi, including the Joyce Banda Foundation International, which has reached out to 1.3 million people in Africa. She's a recipient of 25 international awards, including the Hunger Project Africa Prize, which she shared with former President Joaquim Chissano of Mozambique in '97. And she is a recipient of honorary PhDs from South Korea and the United States. She holds a Master of Arts in Leadership from the Royal Roads University of Victoria in Canada. And joining President Banda on the stage today is one of my favorite professors at the Kennedy School, Professor Calestis Juma, who is the Professor of the Practice of International Development and Director for Science, Technology and Globalization Project at the Belfair Center here at the Kennedy School. He is the International Affairs and Faculty Chair of the Mason Fellows Program here at the Kennedy School and the Director of both the Agricultural Innovation Policy in Africa Project and the Health Innovation Policy in Africa Project. He holds a number of other faculty chairs here at the Kennedy School, alongside which he is the former executive secretary of the UN Convention on Biological Diversity and the founding director of the Africa Center for Technology Studies in Nairobi. I think you'll all agree that both of our panelists today are very well placed to talk to you about leadership in Africa today and into the future. So please join me in welcoming them to the stage.
Your Excellency, welcome to the Kennedy School.
Thank you.
I have the easiest job actually this afternoon is to just ask you a few questions. Sometimes I wonder why good people go into politics. Could you tell us what inspired you to go into politics?
I have also wondered. And I have always said that going into politics and public life, for me, was a detour. I was on the development path, and I have worked for 35 years with women and children in Africa. But in 2004, I was 54, and it was late. I decided that I looked at what I had done, mobilizing women, providing microfinance, providing education to the girl child. But I think what was lacking was somebody to sit in parliament and fight for the laws that negatively impact on women and children. And I decided that perhaps time had come for me to go to parliament and help change those laws. So that's what started my way into politics. I wish there was another way of getting to parliament, but you have to fight. And it's a data game. But I campaigned and won the elections of 2004, went to parliament, and straight away was appointed Minister of Women and Children, and was very well placed to start the process of championing the passing of those bills and changing of those laws. So straight away when I go to parliament, I championed the passing of the domestic violence bill, and it was passed on 16th, I think, of April 2006. So initially, that's what the idea. The reason was, let me go where the laws are made.
So, what do you consider as probably the most challenging moments for you when you entered into politics and rose to the presidency? This is like if you are to advise young people aspiring to go into politics, what would you advise them to prepare for?
I think this is one job where there's no handover. This is one job where you get into, in that office, the first day I went in as Minister of Women and Children, there was nobody else sitting there. In fact, because I'd spent my life fighting that ministry on behalf of women and children, I sat on the visitor seat. I didn't know I needed to go around the table, that I had arrived. Yeah, so my advice to those of you who are fortunate enough to find yourselves here and to be on the path to leadership is, first and foremost, in leadership, I think it is the moral compass. Because there's no way you can learn anywhere how to be a minister of women and children. It is more, yes, knowledge, but wisdom. But also you must ensure that what must guide you is the moral compass. You cannot change. You must always stay away from things, the temptations that will come on your way, particularly in Africa. So you must stay the course. I came to serve the people. I've always said that leadership is a love affair. You fall in love with the people you serve, and they must fall in love with you. And when such is the situation, then you will never allow yourself to do anything that is not on behalf of those that you serve, because you love them, and they love you back. And it's a beautiful feeling when you know they love you back, because there are so many occasions on your way, on this journey. In my case, my ascending to office, you know, that it was difficult. For 72 hours, I wasn't allowed to assume office because people didn't think a woman should take over, and there were so many complications, but the people marched. The people went to Parliament and said, today she will take oath. So that's what I mean by it being a love affair. So you must prepare yourself to stay the course, to have the integrity, the honesty, to refuse to be tempted to do anything that is wrong, and at the back of your mind to always have the people that you want to represent. At any level, it doesn't have only to be in politics. Number two is to realize that if you are serving people, you are in leadership and you're serving people, then the people, you must be accountable. You must always engage them, no matter what difficult decisions you have to make. You must be prepared to take risks. And those that are from Africa and they want to get into leadership, then where the masses, 85% of the people are rural-based, then you are also going to need to get in touch with those. You cannot be a leader up here and not be in touch with the people. And I have seen so many leaders that have flopped miserably because they thought they could come into Africa and become leaders and then ignore the people on the ground. And finally, I believe that leadership is being redefined. Leadership has changed from what we knew it. Those of us who want to stick in office, we don't want to give way to the young to come in. We must also understand that it's not what it used to be. We are supposed to be accountable. The young people and the people we represent are calling upon us to be accountable to them. They want us to listen to them, to engage them. The youth are saying there's nothing about us without us. The women are saying the same, including them in the decision-making processes, and realizing that when you are stubborn and you think you can oppress the people, leadership is emerging from anywhere now, even from a marketplace. So you are sitting in State House, before you know it, there's another leader at the marketplace, and they are screaming and they're coming and they'll take you out. And we've seen it again and again on the continent.
You are the second woman to become president in Africa. I wanted to reflect a bit on your experiences, both as a member of parliament, minister, and president, on what it means to be a female politician in Africa?
I think it's not only Africa. In 1995, we went to Beijing and we made a decision. Came out with a very, very progressive platform for action. And we decided that we're going to get home and get into leadership, participate in leadership. And remember somebody asking Gertrude Mongela saying, but if you want us to go to parliament, there are already MPs sitting on the seats. And she said, well, push them if you have to. But go back and get into leadership. And we went back and we worked hard and we worked hard. But I think what was lacking is that we left our men behind. So there's a period where we've been talking to ourselves. We needed to make men part of the solution in empowering women and changing the status of women. Because it is going to be about both men and women working together to make this a better world. So that is number one. Number two, the other challenge that I have found was now when we went home to try to implement this platform, is now we want the men to be part of the implementing system. And there was rejection in some parts because they were saying, what are you talking about? For example, in my case, when I went home, I organized, chaired what we called Bringing Beijing to Malawi. And at the trade fair grounds where we're having this event, there was a big banner that I put up there, 99 women in parliament in 1999. And the male MPs were saying, are you out of your mind? Which seats are you talking about? If they had been to Beijing with us, if they had been part of the process, they would have known that all we are saying is that time has come for us to be in this together. So, and the challenge that is now universal, that is emerging, that worries me, and must worry most people, is now women's leadership is under attack. The misogyny is getting worse. The scandalization, the abuse, that is even discouraging younger women to enter politics. And I just want, in the absence of time, I just want to mention that you can go and Google and find out what happened in Australia to former Prime Minister Julia Gillard, in Thailand to the former Prime Minister, in Philippines, President Arroyo, in Myanmar, Sasuki. They say she married a foreigner, therefore she may never become president, and we're just crossing our fingers. Then you go into Africa, you go to Zimbabwe, you go to Malawi, you go to Liberia, you go to Argentina, Brazil, Chile, and even here. You are late. Africa has had more than 2 presidents now. You are trying to get one, and it looks like we may never get one. So we are all tensed up, saying, looking at all this and saying, what's going on? And so that is what is worrying. Those are some of the challenges, but what I must say, particularly to those women aspiring to be in leadership in Africa, is to look back to our history and know that we've always been leaders on that continent. That in the past, we have had a queen in Ghana, in Congo, in Zanzibar, even in Malawi, who even went to war. So we were, and in some traditions, when they choose even the male chief, it's women who sit down and form the caucus, the committee that will choose so we've always participated in leadership. It is when now, after colonization, that when some of these kingdoms were abolished, or chieftainships were abolished, that role that women played was not so prominent and so clear. But we've always been leaders. So what to do now is to say, well, we are behind, but we've always led, and our men know that we are the majority, and we need to participate in leadership. And not only are we in majority, but we also even brought the other half in this world.
So what could be done to address the backlash? Because it seems you think it's a global backlash. What can be done to address it?
That that is the challenge now. I mean, I think that other problem that has happened is that, and I'm not saying this to criticize the next generation, the millennials, they call them the millennials, this generation.
Yeah, they are here.
This is my personal opinion, that when we went to Beijing in 1995, it must happen, it must change, and we made noise, we came back, we were given names, we were scandalized. My view was that the next generation went quiet. And they went quiet. Sometimes I feel that maybe because it was easier. We had made it easier, and that some people tried to address the issues that we were raising, and that the women's movement is not what it used to be. So what needs to happen now is that this is our hope. And for goodness sake, I hope the world can stop calling this group the future leaders, because they just delay their participation in leadership. My husband was Minister of Justice at 27. So most people here are older than that. But you find often they will say, oh, you are a young leader, you are young. Wait, it's not your time. Just because we want to stay on. But we must realize that they must come in with fresh ideas, with new ideas, and breathe in fresh life into the women's movement or the movement after all, and ensure that the young people are participating in leadership. What I did when I became president is to take advantage of that position, and that's what we all must do, to appoint 40% of my cabinet were people of 40 and below, 30, 20-something. And I also took advantage of that opportunity to appoint as many women as possible into leadership. And I have always said, it is that team of men, women, and youth that worked so hard to change the face of Malawi, and that's why we were able to register that success.
I wanted to ask you a question regarding your role as minister and then subsequently president in terms of the structure of government, how cabinets actually function, and the extent to which the way governments are organized reflects the interests of the people and the ability of government to deliver to the people.
I think in my case, because of the limited time that I had, I was coming in to serve for 2 years. It was a 5-year term. We had both been elected with the president for 5 years. He served 3 years and passed on, and therefore I took over for the last 2 years. So for me, when I got in, I looked at the operations of government, but perhaps let me just give an example of where I found the country, the government and the country, that the economy had almost collapsed, that there was no fuel for a day, that the country had grown by 1.8%. 2 million people didn't have food. 675 women were dying giving birth by 100,000. There was money for a week for import cover. Companies were operating at 35% and therefore laying off people when I came in. So apart from looking at the structures of government, to say this is how it should be, in that limited time of mine, I decided that I needed to have a very clear plan. And so organized what we called a national dialogue on the economy, at the end of which we had drawn an economic recovery plan, focusing on 5 sectors of energy, mining, tourism, agriculture, and infrastructure, and told the nation that at the end of my 2 years, in each of these 5 sectors, you will have 3 projects completed. In order to achieve that, looking at the structures, whether weak or not weak, was for me to think outside the box and form what I called, as I said earlier, maybe a presidential initiative on maternal health, a presidential initiative on poverty and hunger reduction, and a monitoring unit, an evaluation and monitoring unit to follow up in each of those sectors, on each of those ministries, to make sure that we are implementing and coming up with the results that we wanted. But also to have a ministerial meeting every week to make sure that we are following up on the implementation and the success and failures. So much so that at the end of that period, the 2 years, the 24 months, we had built 20 holding shelters in 20 hospitals. Simultaneously, the private sector just adopted clinics. And the economy had grown from 1.8% to 6.3%. And food, we didn't have food for 2 million people. At the end of the 2 years, we had harvested 3.9 million metric tons of maize. So what I am trying to say is that you can succeed whether the structures are strong or not by doing several things outside the box, but just being creative, by looking at your time. But what is most critical is to have a clear plan to follow.
My last question has to do with what you're doing with yourself now that you are out of power. What are your aspirations? Do you have any plans to go back to power?
Oops. What I'm doing now is I established in 1997, after winning the Africa Prize for Leadership for the Sustainable End of Hunger, I got $50,000 prize money. And I shared that award with President Son of Mozambique. It was only $50,000, and I took that, went home and established the Joyce Banda Foundation, and grew the Joyce Banda Foundation from there to 1.3 million Malawians and other people in Africa. So what I have done now is that I have plenty of time. I was told, I knew that I was not going to continue. I was warned, and I had to make a choice. When I decided to fight corruption in Malawi, I was warned that you either cover it up or you risk losing the elections. And for me, the choice was very simple. If you're stealing from my people, I'll arrest you, I will freeze your account. At the end of the day, I'll lose the elections. There's life there beyond State House. I will go and do other things. So last year, I established what we call, within the Joyce Banda Foundation, the Joyce Banda Foundation Africa Initiative. And in fact, last week, I was in Accra launching what we're calling Elect Her into Office in Africa project to continue to support women standing for office. The Joyce Banda Foundation focuses on 5 pillars. I have always said that in order for us to accelerate the emancipation of women, the empowerment of women, we need to take a holistic approach. So the Joyce Banda Foundation focuses on income, because when there's income in the household, the girls in that household are going to school. Because if there's no income, the boys are going, the girls are not going, and I think it's not fair. And so pillar number 1 is the income. Pillar number 2 is girls' education, because if they don't go to school, they're getting married at 15 and dying giving birth. So the third pillar is maternal health and HIV and AIDS. Pillar 4 is leadership, because I'm a living example of what you can do if you get into leadership. And pillar number 5 is that of rights. So that's what I'm doing. And we are going into 10 countries in Africa.
Could I now turn over to, this is a moment for Q&A. And there are 2 microphones here, and then 2 at the top. And the rules are very simple. Please, brevity. 2, 1 question per customer. And 3, the definition of a question is a logical sequence of words with a question mark at the end. And please don't lecture Her Excellency. So let's start over here, please.
Dr. Banda, thank you so much for coming. My name is Mansoor. I'm a second-year student at the business school. I wanted to ask you about two of the key sectors you mentioned in your development plan, energy and infrastructure. Recently, there's been a lot of pressure from Western organizations like the World Bank for developing countries to limit the development of fossil fuel-based power in those countries. How did you reconcile dealing with those external pressures versus kind of your own priorities for your own country? And how would you counsel future leaders in developing countries?
Yeah, I was trying to avoid that question because I didn't want to offend anybody. But you are right, and let me answer that generally, that sometimes you find that what has affected developing countries, particularly countries in Africa. And one question that I hoped you were going to ask me is that African leaders are at the center of a lot of discussion and debate all over the world. Why? It is sometimes that kind of influence on us, that sometimes you can have your priority to say, we will have roads. But you are chasing aid that says, no, it has to be human rights or health or something. And so, because you are chasing aid, so you divert. But this is supposed to be your priority. So what I found is that even the donors, you need to engage them. You need to tell them what is critical for your country. We in Africa want programs that are designed by us and supported by World Bank, rather than us implementing programs that are designed by other people. And so for us, it's to strike a balance, to make sure that the donors, you develop a good relationship with the donors. Because when you talk to them, it's just like in your country, you also need to have a relationship with your people where you make them understand that yes, you have money for X, but I am looking for money for energy. If I don't have roads in Malawi, then for me, that is delaying development. Can you help me with infrastructure and not what you're saying? Yeah.
Over here, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Sitza Gofard. I am a 2015 graduate of Harvard College. And thank you so much for coming to speak. It's a real honor. Based on your speech and your emphasis on female representation in politics, I wanted to ask you specifically about female representation in legislatures. One of the questions I had is, in 2014 in Malawi, only 30 women won parliamentary seats in parliament, and the percentage of women in parliament actually declined from 22% to 16%. Mm-hmm. Obviously, sort of a very disheartening figure. So why do you think that was, and what efforts do you think need to be done in Malawi and perhaps elsewhere in Africa to increase the number of women in legislatures? Do you think that political quotas, for example, are a good way to achieve that, or does the solution lie elsewhere?
Yeah, that picture you painted is happening across Africa. In fact, I've just been to Ghana, it's 10%. What I think are two reasons. One is the lack of capacity on the part of women to compete side by side with their male counterparts to get into office. It's about money in Africa. Those countries that have affirmative action are doing well because, and it is all about political will. If the president wants, and he has, the constitution allows him, he will appoint more women to parliament. And I think 2 or 3 countries that are doing very well in Africa is because of this affirmative action. And I think a country like Uganda, I think it is Uganda, 1 constituency per district, it's only women that can campaign, that can stand for office. So you know, if there are 30 districts, you know that we shall have 30 women, regardless of what party they come from. So it is to put in place such programs to make sure that women also participate. It's the lack of resources. What we did in Malawi in 2004 and 2009, we engaged the diplomatic community to provide, because they insist on coming to Africa to give us training on how to run for office. And that's the first thing you want to do to me to lose an election in Africa. Because if you come and tell me, be assertive, talk, look them straight in the eye, in Africa you look a chief straight in the eye, he will not support you. You will not win. You look down and you kneel, and you have nothing to lose. So what we need is partnership, that you come from the West and we partner in Africa and provide the appropriate training tailor-made for African women. But they need money. So the Norwegian ambassador in Malawi in 2004 and 2009 provided financial support to all candidates individually, plus materials. That's how we were able to go from 27 to 45 women. Now, then I came into office. And then those women, 45 women, members of parliament, most of them didn't come back. It is the treatment, the way we scandalize women in office, the way we treat women in office, that is discouraging other women to enter politics. If that is what they are going to call me when I get into office, and my children and my husband will be listening to that, then I'm better off in another profession, in another career. For example, let's take Australia, because I don't want to take Malawi. Let's take Australia. They called the Prime Minister Julia Gillard a bitch, a witch, a chicken. This is a distinguished lawyer. So the other women will say, what's the point? I went to Harvard to stay 5 years, sleepless nights, so I can come and be called a witch? No, I would rather do other things. That's, for me, we need to find a way to shame those that are perpetrating this. And sadly, it is sometimes men against women through women. But I was fortunate that I think because for 30 years I was working, I cannot say I ever saw men in Malawi undermine my leadership. In fact, they are the ones who gave me the most support, even more than my fellow women sometimes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, over there, please.
Thank you for your time. My name is Catherine Zealand. I'm an MPA student here, and I've heard you talk about the need to develop the private sector, and equally we hear a lot from companies who say that they have a challenge in hiring, very competent local managers, and I'm interested in your perspective on how you encourage, sort of young leaders within your own country and how you balance that between importing, expatriates and encouraging foreign firms to bring in their own staff, and how you manage that lack of management perhaps that's hindering the private sector.
Yeah, we have a very small private sector in Malawi and very few women in leadership for those that have lived in Malawi. But I think that it's a moral obligation for all companies and the governments and the parliament to realize that time has come for women to play a role and to participate in leadership. And we stand to benefit. So I think in Malawi, there's no rule about how many people they should do. I think in other countries in Africa now, what they've said is that you will have a percentage X in your companies that will be women in managerial positions. Perhaps that's the route we should take, that most countries should ensure that people are made accountable, particularly in the private sector, companies are made accountable. But sometimes I've also found that it is just because we don't engage them. What I did when I was the head of state, I took advantage of the participation of private sector, civil society, and the media in my leadership, in running the country on critical issues, invited them to State House, and sat with them to discuss matters of national interest. And you stand to benefit when you engage them. Sometimes I invited the private sector, sat with me, and just told them, what do you think? Let's look at the economy. How do we move forward? On critical issues like a border dispute that we had with Tanzania, or an issue like when I started fighting corruption, it was chaotic. It had never happened before that 68 people are being arrested at once, and it just caused this chaos, and then they were threatening me, and everybody was being threatened, and so on. And I also called across the board the private sector, all political parties as well, opposition political parties, to State House. Here is this program. I've decided that we must start now. We must fight, and we must stop this theft. It must never happen again. So I'm going to arrest people, so I just wanted you to understand. That kind of thing.
Yes, the gentleman over here.
Hi, My name is Peter. I'm in the physics department. Thank you very much for your time. I had a question. You mentioned the legacy of colonialism, which of course hangs over all of Africa and a lot of other places in the world. And one thing that I think we see in the world now is that a lot of the colonial imposed boundaries lead to a lot of tension because they either split up groups or group groups together that didn't necessarily get along. And so my question to you was, right now we're talking about developing all these nations, but they're following borders that weren't historically natural or, imposed externally. Do you think that perhaps development might be hindered or helped by adherence to organization on the nation-state level, or do you think that there might be a better path for Africa or other places in the world if they were somehow to be able to maybe move some of those borders around or do things that maybe reflected more of historical reality?
That is a hot potato. In Africa now, you don't even talk about the boundaries. We came to accept at the Organization for African Unity that the boundaries that were recognized at the Berlin Conference should stand. And you are right that it is causing conflict all over the place. But the African Union that we have now has really strengthened and grown and doing commendable work in settling disputes and peacekeeping. But I don't think it can ever be possible to shift boundaries around. No, it's not possible. Unfortunately, those that you say came and colonized us. So this country is colonized by French, this by English, then that also brings divisions forever. I mean, we worry about ethnic groups. Even those languages also sometimes are a cause of problems.
Yes, over here, please.
My name's Tim O'Brien. I'm a research fellow at the Center for International Development at the Kennedy School and a former Peace Corps volunteer. I was in Malawi 2008 to 2010. My question's about the future of Malawi. It strikes me that politics in Malawi is extremely adversarial, but on policy, there's a lot of agreement about what the priorities are for the country. With that in mind, and I know you don't have a formal role in government, do you see any way forward where there could be deep collaboration between you and President Mutharika and your parties on issues that you agree on, and in doing so, perhaps building stronger political institutions in the country for years to come? Thank you.
Yeah, so that is why I said that there is a need for political will. You have to decide as a leader that we must rise beyond politics, above politics, for the benefit of our nation. And that is why, during my time, sometimes I would just invite to State House all political parties and come and sit around the table and discuss matters affecting Malawi. That is the way forward, as far as I'm concerned. And two, I think political will, again, when you come in, it is nepotism that sometimes brings about discontent and the frustration on the people. Qualified people, but they can't get a job because they come from another tribe, another ethnic group. What we need to do as leaders, that's what I did, was to ensure that I appoint people from across the nation, but depending on merit. So if I will appoint an Inspector General of Police from the remotest part of the Central region, where I have never even been, I come from the Eastern region, then people know that you're bringing people together and you are going to work together as a nation. But when people spend 5 years with one tribe, then that is what causes frustration and brain drain because people just leave. Yeah.
Yes, over there, Gada.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Your Excellency, for coming. It's really an honor to meet you today. I would just like to say one thing before I ask my question. I used to work for the African Development Bank, and when you came to Bowra, actually, I remember that day because my former manager, who was also a woman, actually, we threw a party, and we celebrated that we had the second woman president in the continent, actually. So that was a great inspiration to all of us, the women at the bank at the time. I'm a Mason. I used to be a Mason Fellow, 2014, and mid-career MPA. I'm currently writing a book about the state of women emancipation in my country, Sudan. That's a very dire state, and it's a big mission I'm working on now. I want you, please, to take us home, probably. We've talked about the economy, about the issues, the politics, the parliament, and all of that. But for a woman of your caliber to have done all of you have done in your country and to become like an inspiration to so many women in the continent and elsewhere, there must have been like big drivers. I know you said you're in a love affair with your people, you're serving and all of that, but there must be other people that you are in love with or who are in love with you that, you know, drove you to do all of that. This could be legacy, could be history, could be family.
Give us a question, please.
Yeah, the question is, what drove you? What is it that, you know, is your inspiration? What keeps you going?
Yeah, I think what is important, since I'm talking to a group that is much younger than me, then you're going to be fortunate to be having children if you don't have them already, or raising children now, is that sometimes what you plant in that child lasts forever. And so to be very careful about what we tell our children. I was 6 years old when a friend of my father was telling my dad that I don't know why, but I feel that this child is going to be great. This child will do something in this country. And my dad laughed. He said, and I remember him saying, but she's just a girl. What are you talking about? So, but me, at the back of my mind, that was a seed that was planted. And I was fortunate that my father, although he laughed that day, every stage of the way, he kept telling me, you know, Mommy, don't forget what Uncle said. You're destined to be great. For me, I didn't know. It wasn't State House. That never occurred to me. But I knew that I was going to do something. So I have always been some little leader. And I've always said maybe that is why I didn't face any challenges when I became state president. From men in my country, in a patriarchal society, and from women in my country. Maybe because for 30 years, all they saw was that Joyce Banda leader is in the church, Joyce Banda leader in an organization, Joyce Banda cabinet minister, Joyce Banda this. And so what drove me, back to your question, is that the system supported me. I was visible as a leader, and they just propelled me. They just helped me along the way, both men and women.
Let's take a question over there. Sorry, I wasn't trying to ignore you.
That's all right. My name is Roslyn Jogu, and I'm a law professor at Triara University in Kenya. And my question, I think, takes us back to the politics of representation. So you said that the first wave, I think, of emancipation is trying to get women to parliament or trying to get numbers in parliament. But in Kenya and in many other countries, we are now seeing, especially where you have a quota that requires a certain number of a certain mix of gender in parliament, we are seeing that increasingly you have these women in parliament, but they are relegated to the parliamentary ghetto, where they end up in ministries or doing parliamentary committees on children and sports and women's issues, and nobody is doing finance or security or things like this. How do you think we can begin to then remove those boundaries? How can women subvert what is, I think, essentially a patriarchal system in parliament?
Yeah, but for me, I think all I can say is that it's political will once more. That appointing women to leadership positions is the first step. For example, in my country, for the first time, we had a Chief Justice that was a woman. But I looked at the Constitution. I was allowed to appoint. I was in leadership myself. I appointed a fellow woman to be Chief Justice. And I just didn't pick from anywhere. She had been a judge for ages. So she was ready for the job, but she was being sidelined. I appointed the first woman to be head of civil service. She was brilliant. She was an ambassador to the United States. She had done it all. It was time for her to assume that position. The first time Malawi had a female Solicitor General. So the first time Malawi had 2 deputy governors of the Reserve Bank, Deputy Inspector General of Police, 8 district commissioners, 100 appointments altogether. But in leadership, in positions that are not just window dressing, real positions. And they did well, and they performed. So we can see that women given an opportunity, they work side by side with their male counterparts and do a good job. But it is appointments first. People must see that they can participate, and that's how we increase the numbers.
Over here, please.
Maswara Branji, am I?
That's where I'm in.
Zikomo.
There's so many people speaking my language in me.
My name is Yvette Efabera. I am a master's graduate and a doctoral student currently at the School of Public Health. And I also was working with Mothers to Mothers as a Global Health Corps Fellow in Malawi during your time in the presidency. So it's really an honor for me to have this opportunity to ask you a question. So in my own area, I'm very interested, and I know your work has exemplified this as well, in two issues in particular, child marriage, as well as the HIV/AIDS epidemic, both of which are problems in Malawi. And so given your experience working in politics, working in the donor side, working with a foundation, there's so many different sectors and approaches. I'm very curious about where you think you can make the most impact, or you have made the most impact on those issues, and why that particular sector approach you think worked very well in Malawi.
Yeah, education. I have paid a lot of attention to education of the girl child, sending as many girls as possible to school, because my research has shown that those that are dying giving birth are between the ages of 15 and 19. So it's obvious it's because they're not going to secondary school, because it's not free. They can't afford the $50 to go to school. And I have been fortunate that the issues that I've promoted and fought for in my life started from personal experience. A best friend of mine who was in the village, brighter than me, ended up not staying in secondary school because the family couldn't raise the $6 she required. And so she left school. And she's where I left her, in the same little house, in the same village. I went all the way to State House and back. Fortunately, I have brought her back. She's now the champion who goes about mobilizing children for the free secondary school that I built in the village. So if a girl child doesn't go to school, community encourages her to get married. And that is why Malawi, as you may have known, for many years was trying to pass a law against girls getting married before the end of the age of 18. Now we have that law. What will be the challenge is domesticating it, making sure that it is happening. How do we police a family to make sure that this child must go to school? The law says, when that child cannot afford to stay in secondary school because they don't have money. So it's a cycle. The girls must go to school and stay in school 4 more years, because that is the 4 more years that will delay her marriage and motherhood. So that is where I will invest, is to make sure that girls are going to school. The American government was very kind to us one time in the 80s and 90s. They implemented a project that they called the Gable Project, where they paid school fees for all girls going to secondary school that were poor. Most of the leaders that we have in Malawi now went through education because of that program. So we can see that when girls don't go to school, we are leaving behind our doctors and our nurses and our pilots because they are not going to school. So investing in education is very, very critical, and then it sorts out the other challenges.
Thank you.
We have only 4 minutes left, and I want to be respectful of time. So I'll take one question here and the next question, and then I'll have Her Excellency answer both questions.
President Banda, thank you so much for being here. I wish I could address you in Chichewa. Unfortunately, I cannot. I am a Kenyan and currently a joint degree here at the Kennedy School and the Business School. My question is about how you view the president versus the presidency. One of the learnings here at the Kennedy School is that sometimes when you have formal authority, as the president has, it's actually quite difficult to do certain things. What did you find actually quite difficult to do as president that you could have done as vice president, or you wish you would have done as vice president?
Yes.
Muli bwanji, My name is Joyce Banda, and I'm actually
Wow.
a Malawian student at
Wow.
yes at Harvard Law School, and I'm
Yeah.
currently undertaking my master's. And my question to you is that, like you said, back home, there's a lot of emphasis on traditions and culture.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we infuse feminist ideals into what some people may consider African tradition and culture?
Oops. Come again. How do we
How do we infuse what feminist ideals into what some people may consider African culture and traditions?
Yeah, let me answer that question first. I think it's just to find a way to strike a balance, and I'll tell you why. I have a very serious problem. As president of a country, you don't talk to a lot of people. You are surrounded by the police. You don't close the door. I mean, somebody closes the door for you. You just go outside the doors. There are policemen all over the place. And people cannot reach you. And that is the problem I had. I think because of my background, coming from the civil society, I opened too wide. It has advantages and it has disadvantages. So you can be in the presidency, you can be a president and you talk to very few people, you're protected. That means you can't come to me and say, you can't tell the nation to say, but Joyce Banda said, because everybody will say, no, where did you meet her? She doesn't talk to people, she's a president. Now I am the opposite. For me, you can come to State House anytime. My number is given to anybody. Anybody can call me, but that's a problem too. That's a very serious problem. In fact, the State House one time changed my number without telling me. And by the afternoon, I summoned all of them. I said, something has happened to my phone because it's not ringing. What has happened? Because for me, anybody and everybody can speak to me. But it is a choice you must make. And both have disadvantages. Because if you lock yourself up and you don't want to talk to the people, you will not know their true situation and you will not address their problems. But then if you also open up too much, you can end up in serious trouble as well. That question, you said that how do we infuse the traditional side and the modern feminism? I decided, and it has worked for me, that I have my own way of achieving gender equality. If you go and make noise and scream and shout and say, I'm a woman, we must be equal and so on, the man can just put his foot down and you are finished. So what I have done is that without intimidating my husband, I just built one step at a time, one step at a time. Before he knew it, he was Malawi's first gentleman. So I still won. I still achieved what I wanted to achieve. I still achieved gender equality. But for Africa and for some of the patriarchal societies in South America and so on, you have to make a decision. I'm going to achieve gender equality, but I'm not going to achieve it by fighting with my husband or confronting him. I'm going to take one step at a time, quietly, and I'll get there. And before they know it, they look around. It's as if they were taking a nap. They wake up, you're sitting here. You made it. You have nothing to lose. That's my advice.
Your Excellency, thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us.